in 2012, Graham and I, we studied at Bethlehem Tertiary Institute. We trained to be primary school teachers, and at the end of we graduated together. And that's us. As you've been studying for 3 years, you're just so excited, you just want to get out of there.
That was our last day of studies. So, at the end of our studies, and I had about 2 months to go, the Dean of Education at Bethlehem Tertiary Institute, he called me into his office, which is never a good thing, right? And he asked me, he said that the school had been approached by an organisation that was working with the refugees in Thailand, and they wanted to start a teacher training college inside the refugee camp there. He told me, there's no money, so you won't be paid. We don't know who you'll teach, and we don't really know where you'll live. But he said, are you in? God had been working on me following up to that month, so I knew this was the right decision to make, and it sounded like an adventure. So I said, yeah, sure, why not? So in, beginning of 2012, I moved to Mela refugee camp. Is that next one? Oh, it's already up. And that's where I started my teacher training. That was my first classroom inside the camp. Now, Mela camp has 40,000 refugees there. They've all come over the border from Myanmar because of the civil war. Yeah, very different place when you train to be a teacher and then you find yourself with only a backpack walking up a mountainside to begin your first class. Was a very different idea of what I thought God was getting me to train for.
And at the same time, while Graham was over there, I was still in New Zealand. I was working in a special needs school down in Tauranga. And we got to a point in our relationship where it was actually 2 years that God had asked me to release Graham, because Graham, we had a really amazing friendship. But like you do when you're an insecure 21-year-old female and you've been broken and hurt and rejected and abandoned, and you cling on to guys for them to rescue you and save you. For 2 years, the Lord had asked me to get on my knees and release Graham so that Jesus would be my saviour, not Graham. And so it took me 2 years, and God pushed and he pushed in a very gentle, loving, kind way, and eventually I got on my knees and I said, God, he's yours. You can have him. You can do whatever you want with our friendship, with our relationship. Because my heart was right, he said, right, now that your heart is right, now you can have him. And so it was 2 weeks later, we said, I love yous at the airport, said goodbye, don't know when I'm going to see you again. But then 3 months later, I went to visit him, put my foot in the refugee camp, and I knew that that was home. So then a month later, we got married at the top of the North Island at Cape Reinga. And we got married on the cheap. Our wedding was less than $1,000, because after you'd been living in a refugee camp and seeing what you've seen, you don't want to spend that kind of money on just one day.
Yeah, that didn't fit the lens I was looking through at that stage. After 6 months of living in the camp with everybody, the idea of coming back to New Zealand and spending that sort of money was not even an afterthought. It was like, no. And this one worked out really well, because I don't know if you've been up to Cape Reinga. There's a Department of Conservation camping ground there at the beach, and I'm sure some of you may agree with me. When you get married, you have to invite everybody, and especially the ones where your parents say, we would like these people to come. And some people you invite, maybe you hope they might not be able to make it. I'm choosing my words carefully. And so when you get married at the top of the country and you're also camping, we had some people say, oh, you have a marvellous day, but unfortunately we won't be able to make it.
What a shame.
What- but it was a brilliant thing.
So we were living on the border of Myanmar and Thailand. Along the border of Thailand, Myanmar are 8 different refugee camps, and so that was where we started. And we started in Mei La, which was the biggest refugee camp along the border.
Right, we just need to set the scene, the background. Thank you, Kendal. We need to set the background of why we were there or why the camps existed. So this is Myanmar history in 30 seconds. So Myanmar has the longest civil war in history. After World War II, things changed hands and the military have kept power virtually all the way through. When I got there in 2012, there was a fledgling democracy that was being built through Aung San Suu Kyi. She won the Nobel Peace Prize through her party, but it wasn't too long before the military decided that experiment we're done with. And so again now the country is back into a very bloody civil war. Everything you can think of in war, genocide, all across the spectrum, happens in Myanmar to this day. I put this slide in when we get people to come to our program, we will explain that shortly. Often they've come from villages that have been burnt down by the military. They've had to run into the jungle areas and live there. Often the children get, they want to get back at the military, which I understand. So the children end up joining their own armed forces. And also the military in Myanmar, they conscript people. If they catch you and you're in a certain area, then congratulations, you've joined the army. And often parents just don't know where their children have gone, and they're now in the armies. We have trained students who were child soldiers that are now Christ followers, but now they're teachers. They still take their AK-47 to the classroom with them, but they have a very different understanding of what their role is now that they know who Jesus is.
So what did we do there? We're primary school teachers, and there were a whole lot of primary schools that had been planted by an organisation in Australia that were saying, we've got all these schools, but we don't actually have trained teachers to put them into these schools. You can have all the beautiful buildings, you can have very limited resources, but if you don't have qualified teachers, then all those buildings actually go to nothing. So that's where we came in. We said, well, we would love to train teachers. So that's what we've been doing for the last 8 years, from 2012 to 2019. Our students came to us with 18 years of rote learning in their classroom. Repeat after me from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Repeat after me, repeat after me. No asking questions, no problem solving, no critical thinking. You're not allowed to ask questions in the classroom because it's seen as disrespecting the teacher, because you're disrespecting their higher authority. So it's just a shut up, listen to me, I'm the boss and I tell you what to do. So when they came to our course, and we encouraged them, we said, please ask us questions. Let's have it as a discussion. That's the way that you're going to learn. And it took about 6 months for eventually the first hand to come up and be brave enough. And through that process of relationship with Graham and I, they learnt that we truly loved them, that we were not there to belittle them or shame them if they made the wrong move or gave a wrong answer, but it was a learning journey. So we taught them PE, drama, music, arts, science, all of those subjects that they didn't get for 18 years. So we trained 8 groups of students while we were there. They trained for 2 years and then they graduate. And then once they graduated, after our second year, after our first group had graduated, we thought, okay, we've got 10 students that have now graduated. What do we do with them? So in our third year of training, God said, right, you need to start building some primary schools. So we built 3 primary schools, Kleimuki, Metapuki, and Pa'an. And they all started with 1 class, 1 grade, and as we were training more teachers, we'd expand the schools from grade 1, now we have up to grade 8.
Now, we had no idea when we first went there it was to train teachers. I had no idea how sneaky God was being in the background. And I love this part of the testimony of what God was doing in the jungle. So in the villages, they are mainly Buddhist or animist. Animists still worship the spirits in the forest. They still do sacrifices. And every little village community has a Buddhist community, an animist community, and a cultural Christian community. So they all live together, but you don't share your faith with somebody else. That's just not done. You certainly don't go and knock on a door, or back in the days, hand out tracts. You're lucky to get out of the village alive. And so what we found was these villagers would contact us and say, we would like a school because our children have nothing, no education, nothing to do. And so we would say, you know that we are Christian? And they're like, yeah, no problem. And we say, if we build a school, it will be a Christian school. And so the village leaders get together and they come back to us and they say, it is okay if you build a Christian school, but you are only allowed to talk about Jesus while the children are at school. Outside of school, you cannot do anything Christian in the community. So we say, 6 hours a day to talk about Jesus, incorporate him through the curriculum. 6 hours a day, I think God is okay with that. So when we build the schools in the villages, what we are finding now is, and this is God's plan, he's amazing. The whole generation of the village and surrounding villages that bring their children to the school, their whole generation is growing up Christian. The children in the school truly have an understanding of who Jesus is in their life. And they make decisions for Jesus at the school. They have spirit-filled teachers that they are with every day. And so the whole generation, in another 5 to 10 years, the people that will be running the villages and will be left there will be those children that have gone through that Christian education program. There's no other way that I could see that ever happening. No amount of door knocking or church planting or anything would create in those villages a faith in the people of a true understanding of Jesus. And I love how God does that. I had no idea, and I'm so proud of our schools for that.
When we interview our students before they come to our teacher training program, when we interview them, we sit with them and we ask them questions because we want to make sure that their heart is for teaching. And a lot of the students, because when they leave high school, there's not a lot of options for them to go to further education. So they really only have 3 to 4 choices. And so when they come to us, some of them say, well, it's because I want to come and learn English. And we always sit with them and say, well, this is not the right program for you. We want to make sure that your heart is for your people, that you love your people, and you want to be able to teach them and go into these places, these villages that no one else wants to go to. And so because of that understanding of when they come to our program, they know that they've been given this amazing opportunity to truly understand who Jesus is and to be given the skills of teaching that nowhere else in Myanmar can offer them. These people are some of the most persecuted people in the world. And yet God is moving powerfully When Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life, he has come and he's brought these people freedom. And to many of us, we can't really understand what freedom is until you've understood how much bondage you've been in first. So we came back to New Zealand in 2020, and the reason why we're still here is because of COVID, me and my military, but the programs are still running today, and we're so proud that our teachers are still training teachers, the primary schools are still operating, not because of anything that we've done, but because they understand who Jesus is, and they are trusting and relying on the power that he and he alone can give them, and that's why it keeps going.
So, I think the number one question we get asked when we share is it safe? Is it safe to be there? And I think the best way to answer this, and I love this story, is if you've ever read any C.S. Lewis, or perhaps you've seen the movies, the Narnia Chronicles, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there's a scene where the children are going to meet Aslan the lion for the first time. If you don't know the series or the books, I think many people here would. If you don't know it, Aslan represents Jesus. And he's a lion. And as they're walking along the road, Lucy, one of the children, just finds out that Aslan is a lion. And she starts to get scared. And she turns to Mr. Beaver, who is taking them there, and she said, "Is he safe?" And Mr. Beaver looks at Lucy and has a small laugh, and he says, "Oh no, Lucy, he's not safe. He's a lion, but he is good." And that absolutely sums up for us what our journey has been like. Living in the jungle, living in Thailand, and then moving into Myanmar. God was never safe. I'm not sure what Bible you read, but it doesn't matter which version. Open it anywhere. Read any small amount of passage and you will soon discover that the people in the stories, they were not safe. If you look at the lives of the apostles, history records it. God certainly was not safe when they decided that they were all in for Jesus. But the arch that is over all of us is that he is good. That when we sign up for this life to follow Jesus, we don't sign up for the safe space that we maybe think we're getting. When we lead young people to the Lord at the moment, when they start to understand who Jesus is, we do them a disservice if we don't say to them, okay, guess what? You're going to go on the best adventure of your life when you step over the line with Jesus. But it's not safe. You're going to suffer persecution and troubles and hardship. Jesus said that, not me. Those were his words. But then taking a step back and saying, but he is good. We sing songs like Good, Good Father, or we hear these things, and it's so true that he's a good father. But this notion that it's safe to follow Jesus, if you think that, you've been lied to. That's not reality.
The foundation for us before we went into the camps was based on Luke 14. If anyone comes to me and does not hate or not choose his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost? For which of you, before you came to know Jesus, did not sit down and count the cost of what it means to truly give your life? Whether he has enough to complete it. Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Or what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. And for us going into this adventure with God, we sat before him and we said, Jesus, I believe that every word in your book is true. So therefore, there is nothing that I choose to hold on to in my life that's going to stop me from giving you everything. And for us, part of those choices was missing out on time with family here in New Zealand, missing out on Christmases, birthdays. A choice for us was that we chose not to have children because we never wanted children to get in the way of what we were doing with all of our students and our teachers. We never wanted to be in a position where we were with our students and a child would come along and get in the way, get sick, and we'd have to come back to New Zealand and leave the program. We were not willing to take that risk. The hardest decision we've ever had to make in our lives, but yet freeing.
We know that children don't get in the way.
Yeah.
It was a decision that we made. And just for us personally, it was a decision that we didn't want to step away from what we were doing.
Just what I noticed this morning when the offering was going around, there was a very cute little moment with a little boy in here, and he was holding onto the coin, and he didn't want to release it into the offering. And we look at that and we say, oh, sweet, that's cute. But how does God look at us? When he looks at us and we're holding on to these things that are trying to save us, we think are trying to save us, but yet, if we just released, then the blessing and the freedom and the power of God that can follow after that, it's a life changer.
I have another quick video I want to play to you. It was one that I saw before I went to the camps. It was part of one of the reasons why I started to challenge my life, why I ended up there, and then something briefly to share after that, and then we will be finished. Our church up in Kerikeri, where we work on the pastoral team, is an elderly congregation, and we have very much enjoyed getting to know everybody there for the last 2 years that we've been in New Zealand. Last night at Cynthia's beautiful house, on the mantelpiece, there were some books, and I picked one of the books up, and it was made in 1926. And I looked at the cover, and it was How to Improve Your Crystal Radio Set. And I flicked through the pages, and I was intrigued. And then I felt God started talking to me. And I reflected on my own life. You know, I've gone through record players, putting the LP on, to the tape deck that was transformational. CDs came along, and now we have crazy technology in our smartphones. And while I was reflecting on that, I felt God was teaching me. And he said, you know, my message does not change. We know that, right? As followers of Jesus, the message does not change. And we never change that core message in his word. And I'm reminded with this cross on the back wall, you can have a brand new laminated, beautiful timbered cross, or you can have some old fence posts put together. It doesn't matter. The message does not change. And I felt God say to me last night, the message doesn't change, but the way that we get that message out, or the way that we approach our Christianity or our walk, needs to change because the world is changing. You know this, and I know this. We work with youth all the time. The world has changed from when I was a teenager. And if I approach the teenagers that I work with now the same way I did back then, they are not interested. They are lost. I cannot connect with them. And so as I read that crystal radio book from 1926, perhaps Ian will understand. I'm sorry, I forgot his last name, but maybe Ian will understand what I'm talking to. As I read that book, it just reminded me again, God's word doesn't change, but our approach needs to. And I say this to you because our church has an elderly population, and I've had the privilege of sitting with some very learned, very intelligent people. One in particular, he won the New Zealand medal for his services. He's one of the most celebrated design engineers, design artists in New Zealand. He set up the design colleges in Wellington. He flew to America for awards and England to get his medals. He's a very, very good friend of mine. The most humblest man you will ever meet. He is 80, maybe 82 years old. And he said to me 2 weeks ago, he said, you know what, Graham? He said, my children, I spent so much time on my career, and even though I loved God and walked that path, I should have spent more time with my children. And he said, half of them, they are not walking with the Lord today. And he said, I fear that I may have wasted my life pursuing this career that I did. And he loves Jesus. But he was lamenting to me. He said, I think I missed the mark. I think maybe God wanted me to do different things and not focus so much on what I did. And I love, his name is Peter, and I love Peter. And I smiled and I listened to him, and then I said, you know what, Peter? It takes courage to even admit that. But I said, as far as I know, you're still breathing, right? You're still here. And he sort of looked at me and he said, I am too old. And I said, you stop right there. And do you want me to open God's word? Do you want me to read the stories to you about the people who thought they were too old? And I don't know you, but I'm sure there will be some people here also that maybe feel that way. Well, it's up to the younger people now to do these things because I've lived my life, but I don't agree with you. There was a couple in Myanmar, an American couple in their 80s, that were going from village to village in the jungle. His name was also Peter, and he had a heart condition, and he had so much medication with him, but they just loved God so much. They were planting churches, they were running from the military at times, and we met them, and they were inspiration for us. So I don't know your journey, I don't know your story. Perhaps you're like my friend Peter, but every one of us has a role to play in the society of today with the people of your influence, the people in your influence sphere, friends and family or people in clubs you belong to. I don't care who they are. your job is to show them the love of Jesus.